Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're not logging in from today for ASJ GEMS. I'm your moderator, Phaedra Kress. And today we're here to talk about non-invasive fat elimination, what works and what doesn't. We have Dr. Barry DiBernardo, who's a nationally recognized thought leader and presenter in plastic surgery. He's also a past president of ASRP and an editorial board member of the Aesthetic Surgery Journal. Dr. D is recognized on a global scale for his research and practice in the field of aesthetic technology. Not only is he a Renaissance man, he's also known as the Idea Man, who helps move yet to exist treatments and technology from concept to creation through clinical safety and efficacy trials. I can also tell you from personal experience, having attended one of his shows, that Dr. DiBernardo is also an incredible photographer. He practices in Montclair, New Jersey. Welcome, Dr. DiBernardo.
Thank you, Phaedra. I don't know where you got that intro from, but thank you very much. And we're going to have a new batch of photos soon. I'm going with National Geographic to see 1,000 whale feet in Alaska in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have a new batch of photos. But anyway, welcome everybody. And you see the title, Non-Invasive Fat Elimination, what works, what doesn't. I'm gonna probably say the conclusion in the beginning, and then we'll come back and I'm gonna repeat it at the end. If your patient's goal is they want all the fat out, this isn't the choice. This is gradual, and we'll go through all of these things in a second. But if someone wants all their fat removed and still remember there's something called liposuction or tummy tucks or something else. All right, so let's go through this. I'm not sure why I'm not advancing. It's on my computer.
There should be a little arrow at the bottom. You can click on.
I know, let me see. I'm gonna stop share for a second.
Okay, sure.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I put this into cat.
We're not seeing the slides.
You're not seeing the slides. Okay. 1 second.
Sure.
Let me go back and share screen. Thank you for that. And this should be it. And hopefully they'll move through now.
We see them, and I think they just need presenter mode.
How's that? Okay, now we're moving. Okay, if something's not right, please let me know.
Okay.
So in this category of and Phaedra, would you tell me when there's 5 minutes left?
Absolutely.
In this category of non-surgical fat removal, I grouped it by energy source, and I did cold, radiofrequency, laser, and magnetic. Those are our major categories. And let's go through these in order. And I kind of put them historically as in the timing of when they came out. So the first real player to this market was cryolipolysis. This is not CME, so the name is cool sculpting. And this was developed from observations by Rox Anderson, Dieter Manstein, and they noticed a couple things. That something called popsicle paniculitis, when kids put cold on their cheeks, there was loss of fat. And when people were riding horses in the cold, the area that was warm next to the horse was not changed, but the cold area got smaller. So cold affected fat cells somehow, and that's what started this whole process. This was the baseline where they went through all the studies and measurements that everyone kind of used with all the other devices afterwards. And you can see on ultrasound 3 months later how the thickness of the fat was much less. You can see the image down below where you see the dip from the cold treatment. So did it work? Yeah, it worked. There was evidence of that. And then we have these series of histologies you'll see on all these devices where you go from untreated, and then reduction of adipocytes over 1, 2, and 3 months to get to the final at 3 months. And in their studies, they did over 800 patients. The final number, and we're going to look at these numbers later, was a 22.4% reduction in fat. So we're going to keep thinking of those numbers, because you have to talk, if you're going to go non-surgical fat, you have to talk to your patients the right way, meaning someone comes in for fat and you have to say, do you know we're going to remove like 1/5 of the fat each treatment? So if we do 2 or 3 treatments, you're going to have so much removed, and that's not going to be 100%. And if it takes 3 months to get to that, and you need 3 treatments, we're talking about working on this for about 9 months. So you need your patients to know this, because it's different from those coming in for liposuction, where it's 100% removed, or 95, 90%, and it's done in an hour or so. So that's huge. So this is the initial device, the cool sculpting, and later they made all sorts of different applicators so you could go around curves. But the other thing to notice when you do non-invasive is these only do a small area at a time. Play the tape forward 8 years later. Now you have a bunch of hoses coming out of one machine, and you can do a bunch of areas. You can run, people were running several machines at once, but that means you have to buy several machines. So you can do more area, but at a cost. More than 20 published papers on this. And these initial papers said low risk. Later, it came out there were 2 problems to note. One was some patients were getting a prolonged nerve pain from the cold, and it was pretty bad. And that for those, it was rare, but those who got it, it wasn't very good. And then there's a much higher incidence of seeing a growth of fat in response to the cold. And that's something to note also. And so it's those 2 things that you have to be aware of when doing this type procedure. So here's some, I'll put some before and afters in all of these, and you can see some fat on the side there, and how it's reduced afterwards. And you can see that here and here, 3 months after, this was one of our patients, 3 months after cool sculpting. So if you're doing targeted areas in patients that are not very obese, these are good treatments. You can see the diagram on the bottom left of how that's where the applicators want, 1 big one, 2 on the side. And I guess we'll bring up now, and many, when you're interested in these devices, you have to ask what's the cost for you to use it, because there can be a consumable cost or a per click cost. So the large applicator down there could be a cost of $275 per use. The little ones could be $125 per use. So your cost to do this procedure could be $500 that's going to the company and not to you. So when doing these things, you need to know the financials as well. Here's another patient we did 2 months after. So decent results, and that's cold. Let's move on. So radio frequency, a few years later after the cool sculpting, there was a radio frequency device called Vanquish, and that is now, many more radio frequencies have come out after that, which actually touch the skin. The nice thing about this is it was non-contact, it was focused RF. So you were treating the abdomen around to the flanks, and this device is built by BTL. So in that treatment, you'd repeat this treatment several times, like 4 times, either several weeks or a month apart. And each time you'd get a reduction, and you'd be treating a large area. It felt kind of warm. But one thing to note is most of the technologies that we've treated with heat rather than cool, we don't see that hypertrophy and we don't see that nerve pain. That's big. Anytime you use heat, you can get a burn, but hopefully these are safe to use. Big thing about the Vanquish that we liked was BTL, the company, didn't make us their business partner. They didn't charge anything for us to use this, so you could use it and keep all the profit. That's a big advantage for the doctor. Same thing with this, animal studies, 40 patients. So all of these devices have studies, 30 subjects here. Mean reduction in the waist was almost 2 inches. And they had some subjects that were non-responders also. And that's the other thing when you move from surgical to non-surgical, and this is just a general rule, if we do things with our hands, it's going to end up the way we want because we won't leave the OR until it does. When you're relying on devices, then it's how does that patient respond to that device? And you have variability, and oftentimes you can have people that have low response and you can have people that have great response. So there's this curve when you deal in the non-surgicals, and you need to know that. Same with Vanquish, the histology, reduction in the fat cells, temperatures were getting up to a maximum of 45 degrees centigrade. And from our previous studies, that's a good temperature to be at to reduce fat. And they had long-term follow-up of these patients with the radiofrequency, and they did pretty well. And this is one of our patients that we did. And as hopefully you can see that anything I'm talking to you about, we either did the study on or we have it. So I'm talking from direct experience, not I got the slides from somebody. So in this patient, that's very decent. You can see how it goes around the waist. You can see the reduction. And for non-surgical, that's a good appearance. Moving on. So there, before I leave radiofrequency, then I just can't talk about every device on the planet in 45 minutes because I want to cover a bunch of things, but there were some more radiofrequency contact devices from Cutera, TrueSculpt. We had at least done the several initial studies on that. Those were kind of warm on the skin. And then they made like 4 different paddles so you can do large parts of the body. Then they got into putting a click charge in there. The laser, so sculpture was the first time a laser was used for non-surgical fat. It had been used previously for minimally invasive fat, which we'll talk about later if we have time. But this was same thing, using warm to get the fat. And the magic wavelength was 1060 nanometers, and that was good for a high affinity for adipose tissue, targeted depth, using all color skin types. And it had, all the things that a laser needed. Many studies on this, and same thing. I'll just go a little faster. You've got the fat. You see the zone in the fat on the top left. By ultrasound, you see a clouding. Those are all the signs you see when fat does very well, and all the histology. And just like we saw in the cool sculpting, go out at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Top left is original size of the fat cells. You see how they're all diminishing over time. And this was using laser to do that. You can see the reduction of the fat layer by ultrasound at 3 months, steady at 6 months. And these patients had MRI evaluations. So very good studies were done on these things. And you can see the fat on the side, and you can see it clearly reduced. Same thing like the RF. This was a contact. It did have cooling in it, but at times it could feel a little warm. Sometimes the warm could be uncomfortable, but it did its thing. It had a partial removal of the fat like the other non-surgical devices. There was a per click charge, probably a little lower than cool sculpting. So there's similarities to all these things. I didn't put it in, but for those who hear the name when we're under the laser category, you've got the Eon EON, Eon robot laser, and that fires this 1060 laser. So now you have an arm that doesn't touch the patient, but it moves around with the laser, and it can kind of cover the whole abdomen to get fat reduction. We tried that. We didn't have good consistency with it. It uses cold air blowing on the skin surface, so that made it more comfortable. It's cool to have a robot doing it. It costs more to have a robot doing it. But that also is a laser-based fat technology. At least when we tried it initially, it was moving nicely on the surface and surface curves, but it didn't have programming yet, like to go around the waist and get that broad area that we saw in the Vanquish. And different patterns of how you could put these little applicators, so you could do 1, 2, 3, or 4 at a time, so you could cover decent areas. The surface was chilled, and you see those little gold dots. If they weren't making good contact, you wouldn't get the green light go ahead. So it had some sophisticated sensors in it as well. And when you put all 4 together, you could get a pretty big treatment zone with that also. I think the treatment was like 25, 30 minutes. And looking at thermal cameras, did its temperature and everything else they're supposed to do, went down 2 to 3 centimeters. And here's a picture before and after. Similar to others. You see results. Okay, and immediately after, this is me. I had cool sculpting, and I had that big iceberg on the left. That's a little weird. When we did heat, it didn't do that. So that's enough about lasers. Let's do the last one in this category. And this is a completely different approach to the non-surgical body contouring. Uses magnetic energy, which the original machine was called M-Sculpt. This was the first one that we could do something we couldn't do surgically, which was build muscle, build abdominal muscle. What I'm going to show you here is the latest applicators, which do the flanks, which we just finished that study on. And so M-Sculpt was unique because it was toning muscle, which we couldn't do surgically. This is a fat talk, but I'm getting there. Then they added radio frequency to the magnetic. So when you see M-Sculpt Neo, M-Sculpt Neo combines the muscle toning with fat reduction at the same time. The RF will bring the temperature up to 45 degrees. What I'm showing you now as an example, it has different applicators for different parts of the body, but I like the flank one because that's the area people, if you just treat that single area, people see that their whole body looks better if they have a nice waist. And again, in surgery, we can't tighten muscle, but this thing can. So it's using a combination of the magnetic waves and the radio frequency waves to do muscle and fat at the same time. These are the applicators. These are the flank applicators, way more powerful than the flat ones for the buttocks and the abdomen, because there's a lot more muscle volume to be treated. And here you can see, look at the size of a rectus muscle on the CAT scan. And when you look at internal oblique, external oblique, transverse abdominis, that's a lot more muscle mass. So this thing has to be a lot more powerful, and it has to get the fat. And usually when we had those other RF devices, anything else going to 45 degrees, as I said, that was a little uncomfortable. And I highly recommend, if you're going to be doing something, buying something, get the treatment yourself, because you know what it feels like and you can explain it properly. And I felt things were kind of warm. With this one, you're the muscle going, you're distracted from the heat. So when we pulled it off and did the thermal camera, it was at 45 degrees, and I couldn't tolerate that with some of the other devices. So it's distracting, but it did its job. And this is the screen. You can control RF channel and the HiFem channel separately, and you can see the thermal camera there, and it's synchronized. And your potential candidates can be skin color doesn't matter, high BMI patients, low BMI patients, athletes who want more muscle, postpartum women who want tightening. And we're looking at the flank here. So that's one of our patients, and you see a nice flank from this. So that was pretty good. And here's some others going around the waist, and this also to see more muscle tone. So it's novel, it's different from all the others. So this is really, if we're doing a fat talk, this is a analysis of all the published studies on each of the things I'm telling you. And what, if you look at all the studies and average the fat reduction, this is what was concluded. So there were some older devices, but I didn't talk about those. So the lasers were giving about 15% reduction per treatment. RF alone was about 18.6, HiFem alone 19, and Cool Sculpting, which was the original, was at the top of that whole group, 22.4%. That's the number we always went by, until recently, with very detailed studies in many centers and many different studies with our MRIs. The RF plus HiFem is showing almost 30% reduction in the fat while you're doing muscle at the same time. So that's kind of how these all stand up to each other. So before I move on, I'm gonna just go back to what I said in the beginning. Make sure your patients, even the best in the lot, a third, make sure your patients know that by going through this treatment, one treatment, or one series of treatments, you're going to have about a third of the fat removed. And if you're doing good patient selection, like some of the patients I showed in the photos, that reduction is enough to make them look pretty good. But if you think in their mind that they want a liposuction result, abdominoplasty result, or they want a result like fast, none of these treatments are really for them. So what we find in our practice is we've got all these devices, and we have a lot of patients coming in asking for them. But when we really look at them, patients select them and explain everything to them, about a third of all of them coming in for these treatments elect to do liposuction for one reason or another. They don't want to wait that long. They want more fat removed. Or another huge section is they have loose skin. They're a little older. They have loose skin, and many of you might see some skin improvement on some of these, but they're not really skin tightening technologies. So that's another important thing to look at, because if someone comes in and you make them smaller, but they still won't put on their bathing suit because the skin's hanging there, your job is to make them look good. And if it's only fat, that may not be the right answer. So I'm going to move on from this in distinction, because if we're talking about technology of fat, I think we have to also see what minimally invasive does. So if we just make a little 3 millimeter puncture and bring up those technologies, who are the players? Same guys: laser, RF, and most recently plasma. Here, and we've had ultrasound. I presented Vaser at the Hot Topics and presented. It's been around for 25 years and we're still using it. So it gets the award for being there for the longest time, and we still use it to break up the fat. You have radio frequency, probably best known as Body Tight, Face Tight, the original Smart Lipo, which does cellulite, cellulase, Precision TX on the neck. And then we have the newer player, which is plasma. So let's just do a quick dive into some of these minimally invasive. And the reason I'm presenting this section is because in your mind, from an energy standpoint, you could do a series, 3, 4, 6 of those non-invasive treatments, and they still don't match up to a single treatment of minimally invasive. Once you get under the skin and you have the power of it under the dermis, you'll be 10 times more powerful at doing what you have to do than working above. And that's why I'm saying this, because it's very different. So the original was Smart Lipo. Started working on that in 2007. Comes with lots of smart technology on it. It senses the temperature. It's very hard to get a burn because it'll turn the it'll shut off in 0.2 seconds if you reach temperature. There's motion sensors. If you stop going, it'll turn off in 0.2 seconds. So it's got a lot, even though this is older, it's got a lot of technology built into it for monitoring. And an example of how that smart sense works is it gives you an even distribution of energy, which you see on the left. When you turn it off, you get hot spots when you get to the end of a stroke. So it really evens out application of energy with 537 patients over 18 months, less than 1% complication rate. So it's got a very good track record with all that technology, no serious side effects. Same histology, you can see the fat cells broken up by that wavelength, and it disrupts them. This is scanning EM, seeing the fat oils coming out of the cells once you break them up. And because you're using the 1064 wavelength in combination, you're coagulating blood vessels, so you get very little fat out of there. I'm sorry, very little blood in your fat mixture as well. We've written the original papers on all the studies of this, proving the tightening. That was an aesthetic surgery journal, of course. And we came up with the 5x5 sector concept. So we all talk the same language of how much energy we're depositing. And it was this ASJ study, which was a landmark study because it's all that work we did in 2007, 2008 that dictated what the magic temperature is you have to get to get stimulation of fibroblasts to make collagen, make elastin without killing cells. We kill cells with CO2 lasers at 100 degrees, no problem. But the key was, how do you stimulate cells to make more collagen and elastin? And every machine that has followed after 2008 all goes after this chart and this temperature, and whether it's non-invasive or invasive. So that's the magic paper in ASJ. Then we did these split studies to prove that further in a follow-up study. And you could see, and remember, I'm talking about this because if you remove fat with whatever you do, non-invasive, but they have loose skin, they're not going to look good. On the right, you see the control. On the left, it's smoother. This patient is 47 years old. She's the perfect example of why I talk about this. 1 month later, she's smaller, but look at little dimpling, and it's not perfect because she has skin laxity. But let the stimulation over 3 months make collagen, make elastin, and get that. That's what you want to see. You don't get perfect bodies in 2022 without tightening skin at the same time. And these are all the charts of how we show the skin shrinkage versus the control, the laser side. And we had 62% more elasticity in the laser side than on the control side. So these things were very proven, and it's all in Aesthetic Surgery Journal. And that was 15 years ago. Very good. This is my treatment of choice to do arms because nobody wants a brachioplasty scar. So you can see, I say to the patient, I can get 100%, but you're going to have this scar, or I can get about 2/3 of that and not have any scar. And most choose to do this. And some of these patients are into their 60s in age. fat in the axilla. If you empty that out, it can look collapsed unless you tighten the skin, and you can do etching and all those 4D things we talk about as well. Moving on to RF. So the first player in going under the skin with RF was Thermi. We all heard about Thermi, and that was monopolar RF. And then later, Body Tight came on the scene from InMode, and that's bipolar RF. So the Thermi, they were the pioneers. Brian Kinney did a lot of work on this originally. Go in, stimulate at those temperatures, and also tighten the lower fibers as well. So you get horizontal and vertical tightening. And that did very well over the years. Studies were done showing the tightening. And look at these from the neck, no liposuction, just tightening the skin, loose skin in the abdomen. And these are single treatments. As I said, these are single treatments going to the right temperature. Even with very wrinkling, it's not all better, but she's bending over. That's the worst you're going to see her. And then we also use this on breasts to do circumferential breast tightening with radio frequency using the same principles. And here's 1 week post-op going circumferentially. And here's 3 months post-op. And you can see a decent tightening. The nipple areola raised up 4.5 centimeters just from tightening the skin and its understructure with just little pokes with no visible scars, as you can see. So there's a lot of applications for these tools. Then we went into the bipolar RF. Jason and I moved on to this because we thought it was a little faster. Anytime we change, it's because we're getting frustrated and we want to move faster. So this was a bit faster, and there's a face one, there's a body one, and I didn't put it here, but in ASJ, we have a paper with 750 consecutive cases of doing these treatments, and showed all the stats on that. It's bipolar, so it's going from one electrode to the external electrode. This is a diagram, what's happening. And it's kind of like ironing wrinkled clothes, and just go back and forth with that. Here's the thermal camera, and and again, the histology all shows the same thing. And here's a diagram or animation of what it's doing. And when you're going up and above, how the energy is going from one to the other. The skin we set at about 38 to 42 degrees, the deep 68 to 70 degrees. But this is what I'm talking about, horizontal tightening, which is building collagen elastin in the dermis, and vertical tightening, which is tightening those bands under that just go up and down. And it will also disrupt fat cells as well. So that's what's going on with this thing. So now the latest one we have is plasma energy. And this one was called years ago J-Plasma. Now it's called Renuvion. The company is Apex, APYX. And it combines the properties of helium plasma, RF fired helium plasma. And here's, again, nice animation here. And what's happening is I suction these patients out first with laser, and then these vertical fibers are all exposed to take the energy of the plasma, which is hitting and getting a vertical tightening. In this instrument, we are not heating the dermis. We are not making more collagen and elastin. We're just doing the vertical. But I have to say that I've been getting some very, very impressive results from that. And our go-to 1-2 punch is Vasorenuvion, clear out the fat, and then hit it with this. And these patients are coming in much tighter than I would have thought. I'm taking videos of like trying to pull on their skin. So this one, and again, why Jason and I continue to move on to here, because it was faster than the other one, right? Every time we see something doing well, we want to do well, but we want to go faster. And this thing goes pretty fast. And that's it. And it's all, the purple on the right is all the the Renuvion aspect. It's still a Bovie with the blue and the red and the yellow. So it's still a Bovie machine, but it has the plasma component also on it. And again, here's some images of these and tightening, and these are very visible. We did a neck only study on this one. We couldn't do any liposuction, just to see for the FDA had to be just tightening for the parameters. And this is the study. It was a multi-center study that we did for the Renuvion, measuring all these separate things. And they, no fat, no muscle, just skin. And you could see, decent changes in these in terms of the skin tightening itself. Anything ideal is like in the neck multimodality, you have to address fat, skin, and muscle. And that's what we do with some of our other combo procedures. So this study, very good, and safety endpoint was 97%, primary effectiveness 82%. So everyone was pretty happy with that. So that is the end of the minimally invasive devices. So what are we going to conclude here before we take questions? So I started with, if someone really wants all the fat removed, do liposuction. If they have loose skin and it's a lot of it, you can do lipo and abdominoplasty or surgery of your choice. That's why we can do all these things, because as plastic surgeons, we have every tool. There's no part we can't address. They can come in and get anything, but there are certain tools and today in 2000, coming upon 2023, if you don't have certain tools, these things have been around since 2008. I mean, we're going on 15 years. So questioning of skin tightening, enhanced removal of fat is really state of the art today. Can you do plain old lipo? Sure you can, but if it's a young patient in their 20s, go to it, do it all day long. But they don't come in, they're 40, 50, 60, 70, and all the patients come in, I want to do this and I don't want an incision. So that's kind of what we're battling going forward. So the talk is really about non-invasive. Hopefully I gave you a demonstration of all the non-invasive that was out there, that is out there, and what you can expect from it. And it has a role, because there are certain patients will not do any surgery. There's just no way they're going to do it, and they won't do anything else in your practice. So if you don't offer those things, those patients, they're going to go to the med spa or somewhere else to get treated. But know that if you give a proper consult, a good portion of them, a third or more, really don't want that. They just want what's best for them. And they're going to listen to you because you're the expert in all these things. And if I say to them, I'll do that, but you're not going to be happy, they most of them listen. And I say, if you're not going to listen to me, well, see me later. If you're unhappy, I'll maybe credit you a little part of your non-surgical, and then we'll put that toward a surgery. And then think about, don't only think non-surgical, because there's a whole huge category, minimally invasive, and minimally invasive is really the way to go, because it's the most powerful. It's the best we have today, and it does much better for, again, those patients who want something but they have looser skin. So I'm going to stop there. I think we kind of hit all these things, and you've got enough information now to ask some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. DiBernardo. You gave us a great 360 there from, as you said, about 15 years ago or so to modern day. So while we are waiting for some questions to come in, we do have one in the chat box. I'm going to launch a poll, and then there'll be a few that follow as well. So while we're kind of chatting back and forth, if everyone can participate in the polls, this one just happens to be a geo poll about where you're logging in from, so we can know our audience. But then we have some based on some of the information that we've gotten from Dr. D. So Michal Klimov is asking, what are your thoughts on soft wave? If you can address that.
Okay, I didn't I didn't put soft wave here. I could have gone on here for 4 hours because my title given was fat, and soft wave isn't fat, but it's certainly in the realm of the devices we're talking about. So for those who don't know what soft wave is, let's categorize it. So what's the energy source? It's ultrasound. It's focused ultrasound. Who was focused ultrasound originally? We had the original, what year was that? 2009 Althera. And we had different modules to put on and different levels, and it had an imaging system in it. So think of the Althera as like your iPhone 3, as Jason says, and the soft wave is your iPhone 14. What it brings to the plate are several things. One, the Althera kind of hurt. This has built-in cooling, so it's much more comfortable. The Althera had one transducer focusing at one point. This has 7 at once, so you've got a much larger footprint to it. This focuses only 1.5 millimeters in the dermis, so you're hitting, we've done ultrasound studies. We know 1.5 millimeters down is the sweet spot to hit the dermis right in the middle. It's generating very high temperatures, like 70 degrees, but it doesn't feel bad because you're cooling. And that's enough to do the stimulation I talked about, the collagen and elastin. And I think the cost to run it is about 25% of what it cost us to run the Althera. So that's good. And what was the last thing? Oh, and it takes 30 minutes to do a whole brow, face, neck, whereas an Althera with the different levels, all that could take us almost an hour and a half. So you've got 1/3 the time, 1/4 of the cost to run it, and very good efficacy and comfort. So who's the patient? I have all these patients come in. They are 42 years old. One was here yesterday, and they're like, I feel loose. And then you go examine them, and it's like, you have nothing to tighten. There's no surgery to do there, but I feel loose. So these devices are made for that middle group who's starting to feel loose, who you can't do a surgery because they don't need it, but they want to do something, and they want to do something they can see. So we do one soft wave treatment, 1 month, 2 treatments, 1 month apart, and we put them on the good skincare. We use the epigenetic skincare underskin, so we do underskin soft wave, and that makes those patients happy. So soft wave has a role. And the other important thing is it's ultrasound, so it doesn't care what color their skin is either.
Thank you so much for that response. So I appreciated you bringing up the economics of some of these treatments, and you just talked about it a little bit, kind of hard costs. So for example, in cool sculpting, you talked about the per clicks, et cetera. And, whereas with Vanquish, you get to keep all the profit, as you mentioned. So are there any other financial considerations, such as upgrades, add-ons, new technology as these things evolve, that, kind of in retrospect or for Monday morning quarterbacks here, you sort of would recommend one device over another because you didn't realize how much you'd be investing after the initial purchase?
Sure. That's a whole lecture in itself, of course, and happy to do it. But there's a formula to this. So first and foremost, you got to pick something that works. A lot of times, Jason and I have the first ones of them. We have to prove that they work, so that's a little more chancy, but we've been doing this for 25 years, so we have a pretty good physics understanding. We can probably pick 9 out of 10. I can pick certain devices. I don't even bring them out. That's not going to work. I know that. One big thing with the economics, which we saw in cool sculpting, let's assume something does work. If you're early to the market on it, you're gonna do very well if it's something really good, and you let people know about it. Like with cool sculpting, I don't know how much we were doing a month in the beginning, like crazy, $80,000, $100,000 a month. then they started selling it everywhere all around us to everyone that was breathing. And our $100,000 a month went to $2,000 a month because now they're everywhere and everyone's competing in price and they're driving the price down. And then Cool Sculpting responds with, okay, now there's a minimally advertised price, so they have to battle again. So that's a whole mess. So my point of getting something when it's new and there are not that many around, our formula is we do that in the first month or two, it's paid for. And this is why I'm in position to now go buy the next machine. And you guys know how many machines we have because we're ready, pay it off. So from the purchase standpoint, my advice is have a good relationship with your bank, because I don't lease it from the companies or anything else. I go to my bank and I go, I got this machine, I want to get this, and then we pay the lease. And I always get a 5-year, but I get one I can pay off immediately, because if I do very well with it, it's paid off in 2-3 months and I get rid of the loan. If I'm
So,
wrong, I have 5 years to not get hit too hard on it. Fortunately, we're right most of the time. So that's about the purchase of the machine. But if you're, and I know physicians near me where they'll watch for 2 years and then they see all of us doing these and then they buy the machine. Now they don't have that many patients for it. It takes them the 3 to 5 years to pay it off or to lease it, whatever. So timing, if you have a good feel, and if you don't have a good feel, just ask us what we're doing. Timing is important. Getting the right lease or payment on it at this time of year, very important for those in the United States, is if you're buying a machine in December, and we're looking at 3 different machines right now, there's something called Section 179. So your tax rate, so like 40%, comes off as a tax credit up front. So if it's a $100,000 machine, I'm going to get a $40,000 credit on my taxes right now. And even if I'm leasing it, I can pay it for 3 years, but I get the credit by, for this year. So keep in mind the taxes. And then your big calculation has to be, what are the, as you were saying, Phaedra, what are the consumables? How much are they? What is the service contract? How much will it be? And what is the cost to keep this thing running? And don't forget to add in, why do I keep asking about or saying that took an hour and a half to do and that took 30 minutes? Because I'm calculating room time, I'm calculating staff time, and that all adds up as well. My ROI from a Softwave is 300 times that of an Althera if everything else is the same, just because it takes 1/3 the time to do it, not to mention the consumable cost. So I make a whole pro forma before I get any machine. And sometimes we're the first to get these, and we'll beat up on the companies and say that I don't think that's going to fly. And a lot of times they'll listen and change parameters, because it won't, it's a good model for your stockholders, but it's not going to work for all of us. And Jason and I have to kind of represent us in these devices.
So very, very helpful. We have a bunch of questions coming in, and I know we've got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to start with one question that hopefully it can be a 1-word answer or 1-line answer, and then we'll delve into some of the more tricky questions. So Zoe, oops, they just kind of moved up. Zoe Papadato is asking, if you could afford to buy one device, what would that one device be?
It's not one word. Are you a face practice? Are you a body practice? You've got to see what you do. And always anything like resurfacing, BBLs, those are very profitable. They don't have consumable costs. The Cyton devices are very good that way if you're doing face. If you're doing body, it's a little harder than that. But just see what it is you do and what works with your type of patients.
Okay, great. Bruce Van Natta is with us here. And Bruce, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, otherwise I can read it for you.
No, that's fine. Barry, just a quick question of your experience using Renuvian as a standalone just to get some skin tightening versus a patient you want to do some liposuction, they don't want skin excision, and then using Renuvion hopefully to get better tightening. Do you find it to be as effective when you follow liposuction as if you just use it standalone?
It's my eyeball opinion I'm giving you. I think my biggest tightening results, and later I can show you my videos and pictures, I think come from taking the fat out, exposing the fibers only to the Renuvion. I think I'm getting more that way, but I'm not saying we can't do it the other way. I'm working on a project right now, and you must have these patients too. And I've thought of this for 5 years. It's the older ladies that come in with this loose skin on the anterior thigh, and they pull it up for you, and they have loose skin, wrinkling, and crepiness. So this has been my mission. So number one, so I'm doing a bunch of patients, and I don't want to, I think they're going to be okay with my plan. I run the Renuvion up and down their thighs, front, back, whatever, no fat, just skin tightening to get the laxity. Then they have deeper wrinkles in the skin, and that I use the Precision TX, the laser fiber firing up at dermis, and that helps the wrinkles, because these are all at different levels. Renuvion doesn't hit the top. And finally, they have crepiness, brown spots, and just aging on the surface. And we take the Hero, the BBL Hero that we can run high energy rapid output to clear the pigment. And in current studies, we're showing those are helping with crepiness as well. So I'm splitting that tissue into low, medium, superficial. I'm hitting it with 3 different instruments, and keep your fingers crossed. I may be approaching satisfying these ladies, but to answer your question, yes, I do take the Renuvion, run it for the skin laxity without the fat. So that's the long answer to your short question.
Okay, moving on to Paul O'Dane. He's asking, is the average fat reduction per treatment or per session? And does the average fat reduction vary according to the volume of the fat, or is it a linear reduction if a lot of fat, or if the fat is always 20% as if the volume was lesser? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty confused by that, but
Dr. O'Dane, if you want to unmute and maybe
you have to look at how the what is a recommended treatment. Like if the company says it's one treatment gets you this much, that's the number. In other devices, they say this is a series of 4 treatments, 1 week apart. That's your number. So whatever is the recommended series is the number that's being reported.
I think he's asking though, the fat reduction. So do you think of it in terms of per treatment or per session, or at the end of, you said sometimes it's 9 months. I think Dr. O'Dane.
It's per treatment or per session. Like Cool Sculpting, I believe, says that's per treatment. Whereas a session with a HiFem, with a M-Sculpt Neo, I know it's 4 treatments, 1 week apart. So just figure out if they're talking per session or per treatment, because each machine's different. Some say it's 2, some 3, 4, 1.
Okay,
But
Dr.
at the
O'Dane,
end of
did
the
you
day,
wanna-
Yes, thank you. And the other part of the question is, for example, it's not the same if the panniculus is 10 centimeters of height or 5 centimeters. Maybe the effectiveness of the treatment won't be the same. That's why I was asking if it's 20% disregarding the volume of fat, or it has to the volume.
Well, we're assuming you're going to follow the patient selection criteria. So if it was 10 centimeters, you would never select that patient because they're not a candidate for this. But if they're 3, 4, 5 centimeters, those are candidates. So you're assuming you only see big differences in patients who you can see a 20% difference. If someone has 6 inches of fat, you're not going to see a thing. So it's assuming you're doing proper patient selection.
Last question. The frequency of the sessions, how is it determined? I mean, can you change the frequency of the sessions, or it's inamovable, cannot be moved, let's say?
Well, depending on what device you're talking about, the manufacturer has set up, usually in their studies, what that's all dictated by the studies. Now, if a study says you're going to remove 25% of the fat doing it this way, and that's how we recommend it, that's what it is. That's not to say a lot of times we get devices and then we push the envelope and try to go further. That's just that's manufacturer's recommendation. And if you feel like you have a better way and it's safe, you can try to do something else, which we try to do all the time to make things do better. But in a call like this, I'm going to say do what the manufacturer says.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. O'Dane. And Dr. Val Lambros is with us. I'm not sure if you care to unmute and ask your question, Dr. Lambros, or I can read it for you.
Am I muted now? Can you hear
no,
me?
we hear you. Thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah,
doctor.
we can hear you.
Okay, well, two of us asked the same question at about the same time. And I'll repeat it. I think that offering averages of fat removal is incredibly misleading, because typically they're done in skinnier patients, and you can say that you get 20% off. But as the previous doctor said, 20% of 10 centimeters is 2 centimeters, and 20% of 4 centimeters is 0.8. I think it's much more rational, realistic, but not necessarily effective in a marketing sense to give the absolute number of fat, number of fat reduction, which is actually something that's more easily obtained, and it's more standardized and consistent, but it's not as impressive. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with that. And when we do, we have all sorts of measuring tools here, and we report in millimeters, and what you have to ask in a lot of these different devices, and there was a new ultrasound device this year out there. One of the things you have to ask is, what is the range that this energy is hitting? Like this one is like between 1 and 3 centimeters, or 1 and 2 centimeters. So you need, it's all those questions, Val. It's all those technical metric questions. What is the zone that this thing's hitting? If it only hits between 1 and 2 centimeters, don't think you're going to get 5 centimeters down unless you keep doing it and just bringing it down. And
of course not. But of course not. But that's kind of the point.
The reason I put the chart with all the percentages is because that chart looked at all the studies, and for me to report that's all I got to report to you, is that all these studies are done as percentages, and I'm not seeing many of them in centimeters or millimeters. But I agree. Millimeters, centimeters is much more accurate.
Yeah, my personal feeling in this is, if you reported the number of millimeters you get with any of the fat reducing modalities in non-invasive, it's less than 1 centimeter. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. And that's why when you're talking about these non-invasive devices, I was trying to impress upon everyone that it's not as big a fat removal as you think it's going to be, because of what you're saying. It's not. If you want a lot of fat removal, my first sentence in this talk was, do liposuction, do something, do surgery. But these are not for your big fat removals. The ones who are really happy are those thinner patients who just have a stubborn area, and you're really not going to take them to surgery anyway.
And I think that that kind of speaks to, managing patient expectations. And I think that brings us to a great stopping point here. We've handled all the questions. We thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And for everyone, this is our final gem of the year. So we look forward to next year, more topics, more speakers, more education for all of us. Thank you, Dr. DiBernardo, and to everyone who attended this webinar and those throughout the year. We appreciate the kind words and that you're all with us. So thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving and holiday season.
Thank you,
Take
Phaedra.
care.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.